Welcome back to the Middle of Culture. I am one of your co-hosts, Peter.
And I am your other co-host, Eden.
Eden, we both talked before we hit record how we're kind of surviving.
It's dragon ass o'clock.
Yes, it is. Yes,
that's how I think all of us are feeling these days. But hey, we're here. We're here. We're queer. Get used to it, right? That's what they used to say.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, what have you been checking out? Anything fun that you wanted to talk about this week?
Yeah, there's a few things I could mention. I have been keeping reading a lot. I think I talked about last week how light novels have good ideas and bad execution, right?
Uh-huh. You did?
Well, I have found one. Well, I talked about how I'm in Love with the Villainess is one of the few that I feel like does have good prose while also having cool story. I have stumbled onto another series that is really interesting and that I'm really enjoying. And that is a series called Adachi and Shimamura, which is a story about these two high school kids who like slowly but surely are kind of falling for each other, but it is like the slowest burn book I've maybe ever read in my life. I'm 2/3 of the way through book 2 and nothing has happened yet. But apparently it takes till book 6 for them to actually start dating.
Okay, that's all.
Which like
just to book 6.
Just book 6. I expect that from like a manga. Often that happens, you know, like that it takes a while for folks to get together in a manga. 2 volumes through Puppets Attract, those two have never even touched, much less held hands or talked about how they're clearly really into each other. They are just friends who have dogs who are friends. And it's like, how long is it going to take you two to like get this going? But that's like normal for manga, but I've never read a book series that's that way.
Sure.
But the important thing is it's really well written. Like the prose is the best prose I have ever seen in a light novel.
Okay.
It's just really compellingly written. I feel like it has really authentic voices for the two main characters in a way that I have never seen in a light novel before. It doesn't have the problem, and I think this is especially true of light novels that were originally web novels. There's a lot of repetition, especially when you start a new chapter. It's often like placing the pieces on the table again in case this is your first chapter, much like, you know, a longer serialized comic. The goal always used to be the phrase people used to say about comics is any single issue could be somebody's first issue. So it needs to be readable, even if it is the first book that first comic that person has ever picked up.
Okay.
That's not true in comics anymore. There are a lot of them, if it was ever really true, but there are a lot of them for which that's just not true, where like I will flip through something that has an interesting cover at the comic shop and I, doctor of comic books, will finish flipping through that and be like, what the hell was that? Like, I have no idea. Like, I know who these characters even are because this is just like some DC book, but I have no idea why this is the situation, why these are the stakes, why I should care about what's happening in any of the spots. And so I feel like web novels are often the same way, where every time there's a new chapter, the stakes have to be laid again. And that doesn't often change when they get then turned into light novels. And it's just kind of off-putting to read a book like that. You know what's another book that I tried reading that was like that? I don't know if you've tried reading any of the High Republic Star Wars books. Have you read any of those at all?
I have not.
Well, I tried the first one, Light of the Jedi, because conceptually, it sounds great. Yes, the Jedi as first responders. Let's fucking go. But the prose was so stultifying because it kept repeating the concept of what was happening over and over and like restating the stakes and re-explaining the premise. And I was like, this is just boring. And that often happens with light novels. It's not happening with this one. Like the prose is just so well written that you don't mind that nothing happens. Book 2 opens with 50 pages of Shimamura going with her mom to the gym and like running on the treadmill, and then her mom comes over and is kind of a bitch about how she's not very good at working out, and so then she goes and she swims, and like it's kind of boring as she swims, and then she goes into the sauna. Like 50 pages of this, nothing happens, but it was a delight to read. So it was really, really, it's really fascinating to read this series. I don't know how much of this, again, as I mentioned last week or last time when I was talking about light novels, I don't know how much of this to lay at the foot of the translator, how much of this to lay at the foot of the original writer. But it's really, really well written. I'm shocked how tight the prose is.
Nice.
I also read a book called, I have to look up who wrote it, because I want to give them their due. I read Jameis Bachman Ghost Hunter by Jen Jensen, which is, I was just looking for something different. This is like a weird paranormal book about this woman who used to be the host of like a paranormal TV show, but like was never able to find any proof of anything. Her show's been canceled, and so now she's kind of in a tailspin regarding her life. And so she was just like in a tailspin regarding her life, but she sees this video posted to her socials that are like, Jameis, you've got to come help us. We've got a poltergeist in our house. So she goes to Sage Creek, Utah, which I think is Cedar City with the numbers filed off, but closer to Salt Lake.
Okay.
I think. Because obviously there is no college town in rural Utah called Sage Creek. Right. So I think it's supposed to be Cedar City, but like 2 hours closer to Salt Lake. Regardless, fake town. And she like kind of ingratiates herself with members of the town, tries to solve the mystery of why this ghost might be there, why this poltergeist might be there. It was actually pretty good. I really had a fun time with it. Cool. And that's kind of it for me. I continue watching Andor after our rewatch of those first 3 episodes. I watched episodes 4, 5, and 6. I continue to do that so I can hopefully be caught up by the time the show comes on in a few weeks here. But that's kind of it. What about you? What have you been up to?
Well, so to that, Gareth and I did the same. We watched episodes 4, 5, and 6 of Andor. Very good, very tense. I
was going to say, should we have a quick spoiler section on the heist?
Yeah, I mean, it's been out.
Let's have a quick spoiler section, folks.
So I think the statute of limitations has passed. So
it's a 3-year-old show. We're fine.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it was great. We really, really enjoyed that next little arc. Yeah, very tense, especially like I say, that 3rd episode, the whole heist part. I'm just like, I could feel myself tense the whole time, just waiting. Okay, who's gonna die? What's gonna go wrong? I know something's gonna go wrong. I knew that the nice kid with the manifesto was gonna die.
The minute you find out that he is the kid with the manifesto who believes that Andor has a good heart, you're like, this kid is so dead coded. Like,
oh yeah,
this
totally.
Kid is 100%. So toast. And like, I think it's worth talking about. Like this, like those first 3 episodes, that second 3 episodes are a very tight, very contained arc where it spends another couple episodes building a lot of tension, laying a lot of pieces on the board, and then it finally like explodes in action in this final episode. As basically what the premise is he takes Andor to this planet where they're going to steal the quarterly payroll for an entire Imperial sector. And Andor gets dropped in at the last minute with a group that did not expect him to be there, does not want him to be there, does not trust him, as they have been slumming it in the Highlands for months trying to plan for this. And suddenly this X Factor appears, but it's a damn good thing he's there, because they would have all got if he wasn't there.
Oh yeah.
It's really, really good though. And the action is really tense. Some of the most impressive CG I've seen in these Star Wars shows, which often feel a little flat, but like that scene as they're escaping into the eye is just incredible. The
eye was breathtaking. I didn't know, as they're talking about what the eye is, I didn't quite, I wasn't visualizing it all the way in my head. It starts and we get just the random, little like meteors or whatever flying through at the very beginning. And I still wasn't sure. And then when it just happens full on, it is breathtaking. It was beautiful. And yeah, their escape into that and that little narrow window that they get through and the TIE fighters getting just destroyed was one of the coolest scenes. It reminded me a lot of the scene in Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, just in that it was one of the coolest, most just kind of unique, visually arresting scenes I've seen, TV or movies, period. And it reminds me again of that scene where basically Mount Doom becomes Mount Doom in Rings of Power, which that shows other flaws aside. That scene is just incredible, and this was awesome. Like, it was so cool to watch.
Yeah, and it's so weighted with like symbolism throughout this thing. You've got your idealist kid who is like, I am writing a manifesto about the role of these different moving parts in the struggle for galactic freedom. And he thinks that Andor is a true believer, but then he finds out Andor is just a mercenary. But like, that doesn't mean that Andor doesn't care about this stuff and that he's not there to win. And like, as they're having that conversation where he's like, you don't care, you think, should we just sit back and be thankful for what we're given? And he has that like dark moment where he's like, do I look like I'm thankful? And you're just like, oh man, like it just hits. And and how does Nemec die? How does this idealist who is writing this manifesto about how to fight against capitalism and fascism, how does he die?
He gets crushed.
Literally crushed by capital. He is crushed by capital. Money crushes him and breaks his spine and kills him. And like, this is not a subtle show, but I think it's stronger for it. Like, there's no subtlety to be had here. There is just like, I'm going to beat you over the head with these themes and you're going to get it. And guess what? I get it and I like it. And it's really impressive.
Yeah.
So I guess then the next question is, you got through 4, 5, and 6. What do you think's going to happen in the back half of this show now? Oh, Andor's got a boatload of money, a ship. What does he do now?
He's going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but he's going to get in trouble.
Yeah. Well, I keep watching because I think we'll have some interesting conversations to have about what happens to him.
Yeah, no, we're definitely going to, we're going to keep watching. But yeah, so we've been really enjoying that. I keep working on Wind and Truth, book 5 in the Stormlight Archive. I am enjoying it. It is a lot to take in. There's a lot happening. There are a lot of moving pieces. There's been a lot that's built up to this, thousands and thousands of pages. So it's definitely something where I find myself just taking it a little slower because it's a lot. I finished Avowed, completed the game. We're going to talk about that more.
Yeah.
And then the final thing is, it's been a good couple weeks for music. So, Eden, did you ever get into Sunbather, the band Sunbather? Deaf Heaven. Sunbather was their album.
Deaf Heaven, I think I've heard them before. I don't know how much I've listened to them, but I'm familiar with their name. The name it's a name I recognize.
They're very black gaze. So, black metal melded with some shoegaze aesthetics. Sunbather was their big breakout album that really became very popular, and it's excellent. It's fantastic. If you're all interested in exploring black gaze, if you like shoegaze kind of stuff, I think that Sunbather's great. Their albums since then have been a little hit and miss for me, but their most recent album, Lonely People with Power, is really good. And I think it's probably my favorite album of theirs, next to Sunbather at least. And there's a chance it could be a better album than Sunbather. I don't know. I'll need time to see. But that one's been really good. Amenra. I don't know. How familiar are you with Belgium's Amenra?
I have listened to them as well.
So they had two EPs that came out on the same day, with Fang and Claw and Detorn. And it's really interesting because these two EPs, they both just have two songs on them. With Fang and Claw is like, I don't know, 10, 11 minutes. Detorn is closer to 25 to 30 minutes. And with Fang and Claw is very much, it really does a nice job showcasing Amenra, where they came from and who they are right now. With Fang and Claw is very much, where did Amenra come from? It is, the songs are shorter, they're a lot punchier, they're very immediate. They are a lot more similar to the earlier Amenra stuff. Detorn is a lot like Didorn and Mass 6 in that the songs are a lot longer, slower build, really embracing the post aspects of their sound. And I like them both a lot, but Detorn, oh my gosh, just the first track on that, it was funny. I was listening to them back to back. I was just like, I had headphones on. I was kicking back in a recliner. It was like, I don't know, Sunday afternoon or something like that. And it was really eerie because as the first track on Detorn starts, it's almost like this, a heartbeat kind of sound. And it was interesting with the way I had my AirPods Pro in and I didn't have the spatial audio turned on, but just it sounded like, it freaked me out because this thud felt like it was coming from the room around me. And then it slowly builds and builds and builds until the last 4 minutes are just this incredible crescendo. And the second track is similar. I really, really like Amenra. Their lead vocalist, I'm blanking on his name now, but I know at some point he said, "We sing about life, and life is pain." And so you know what? Some days Amenra just gets me, and it gets me where I need to go. So both of them excellent. Detorn especially, in my opinion, the out of the two, I wouldn't say it's the stronger, but it's the one that connects with me more. But I am really, really enjoying both of those. And
I think it's a weird choice to put out two EPs on the same day instead of just put out an LP. But I'm not going to judge. The era of the LP as the predominant method of both music release and music consumption is so far gone. We being, I know you and I are both like album listeners, not single listeners.
Yes.
And we are in the minority there. But it still feels weird to me to be like, well, we'll just put out two EPs on the same day. And it's like, just put out one L. I mean, honestly, it sounds like you're coming in at less than 40 all told. Just put out one EP, babies. Just put out one EP. But I get it. It's also, if they're trying to play with like two different sounds, I get why you would do that. Why you'd make that choice.
Yeah, it was a little odd. But, having listened to them, I'm like, okay, cool. I love it. I'm down with it. They're great. And then this last Friday, so a week ago tomorrow, Allegion, a band from Colorado, released their most recent album, The Ossuary Lens. Now, I love Allegion. I probably enjoy, I think, more of Allegion than perhaps they're the deserving, although the more I listen to them, I don't think that that's actually true. I found Allegion a little late in the game. They had put out kind of a first little 4-song EP and then 3 full albums. It was when they were getting ready to release their 4th full-length album, Proponent for Sentience, in 2016 that I came across them. And I came across them because there is a cover at the end of the final track on that album. There was a cover, and they had released a video for it in anticipation of the album coming out. Now, Allegion is very much a kind of technical death metal band. They do an interesting thing where they straddle very nicely technical death metal, progressive death metal, and melodic death metal. So they're absolutely technical. Their songs are very intricate. The guitarists are just astoundingly good, and they don't have any bones about showing it off. But they still land in that melodic side where they'll have really cool guitar solos. And again, there's a melodicism to their music that is a little more emphasized than in most really what you would consider straight tech death. But then again, they also like to explore. They bring in classical guitar and other things like that. And so you get some progressive tendencies. So they have done 3 cover songs in their career. And the first one was by a little band called Rush. And it was the song Subdivisions.
Okay.
And it is a very, very good cover of the song. It is very true and faithful to the original, but it still sounds like a Legion, but it is instantly recognizable as Subdivisions, the Rush song. They have also done a cover of Animate by Rush. And the third cover that they have done in their career is Roundabout by Yes. So clearly you can see where they're drawing some of their influences from.
For sure.
So really you've got these people who love progressive rock, but are playing technical death metal. And I think that probably gives you a decent idea of where they're coming from. So the Ossuary Lens is their first album in a few years, and I don't know what it is. There is some ineffable quality to their music, and in particular to this album, that I cannot describe for you. I could not put into words why I am so addicted to this album. There are moments with just incredible riffs that are both brutal and heavy, but at the same time, just almost inspiring in this quality to them. It reminds me a lot of my favorite album from last year, 2024. My favorite album from last year was the album Kinship by Jotun. And it was the same thing where Jotun is it's progressive metal. There's death moments. There's all these things mixed together. But what made that album so addictive to me were these moments of just grandeur, where all of a sudden it'll switch things up and you get this moment where it literally sends chills down my spine. A Legion, this album isn't quite the same in those moments of grandeur, but I get these moments where there's like this 5-second just riff that'll come in, and the same thing, it just like, oh, it is so good. And I've been listening to this album nonstop since it came out on Friday. I don't know if it's my favorite album of theirs, but I also don't recall ever being so completely just bought into one of their albums so quickly. So very exciting. Nice. They're cool dudes as well. I've gone to a number of shows at smaller venues and chatted with members of the band at the merch table when they were manning the merch table while other bands were playing and stuff. Very cool, very chill. Guys seem really nice and very, very very interactive with their fans. You know, they have a Discord where they spend time in there, and members of the band post videos and chat with people, and they'll do video game. They're like, hey, let's all get on, Call of Duty Warfare or something like that, and let's play together and stuff like that. So cool group of people, and just an excellent album that right now, hands down, my favorite album of the year so far. And I have been listening. I've been inflicting it upon others because I cannot stop listening to it.
Love to have those parasocial relationships.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, well, let's get into our topic for the week. And the topic for the week it's going to be, at least on my side of it, kind of a hybrid. On the one hand, what I wanted us to talk about were what are some computer, in particular, video game RPG mechanics that we really enjoy, that maybe a game has done that we found really elevated that game, or, what are the things that make us sort of drawn to a video game in the RPG genre that we're going to like maybe more than others. But the reason that I thought of this is because, as I mentioned earlier, I finished Avowed, the latest game by Obsidian, and I know you finished it. You had talked about it previously. Mm-hmm. And I initially was having a little bit of a difficult time getting into it. But I will say, having now finished Avowed, there are so many things in this game, as I was playing it, that I just kept thinking to myself, I hope other RPGs in the future borrow this, or I love this mechanic. There were so many little things. Some of them were quality of life. Some of them were just the way the game was made. But there were a ton of things that made me go, the next time I play a similar type of RPG and it doesn't have X, Y, or Z, I'm going to be sad. So
now I'm really curious to have that part of this conversation, because I obviously really liked Avowed. I talked about how much I liked Avowed, but I think I said in the podcast, but if not, I definitely said to folks in my life as I talked about Avowed, it felt like a game from 2011 to me.
Okay.
In both positive and negative ways. A lot of the way that the game was structured, a lot of the way that the game played felt like the best game from 15 years ago.
Okay. I can see that.
Which is how I felt about their isometric CRPGs too. That's Pillars of Eternity 2 is the best game of 2002 that came out in 2018 or whenever it came out. And that is kind of how I felt about Avowed too. So I'm very curious to chat with you about like, what were the things that really stuck out to you as interesting or as things that you want other RPGs to do, if only to reflect on them. As myself, I think I've played a lot of newer RPGs than you maybe have.
You have.
To maybe be like, oh, are these things that other games are doing? So I could be like, hey, if you liked that, here are some options. Or for me to maybe reflect and be like, no, these are things that Avowed is doing that are different than what you've been seeing or that are good innovations in the space. So I'm very curious to have this convo.
So I thought we could start with the general. What are the general RPG things we like? And then we can get more into Avowed, because I also think I think we'll need to talk about what did we do? Because we've hinted at the past.
We'll have to spoil.
We'll have to spoil. So, yes. So,
I mean, there's one thing that apparently happens in basically Act 2 of that game that you can make not happen. And I thought that was hard-coded into the game. But no, I just fucked up. And a big thing happened.
Oh, I bet you I know what it was, because we'll talk about it. Needless to say,
okay, yeah, we'll get there. I thought that was just part of the game. No, you can avoid that. And I was so fucking pissed when I found that out. Anyway, let's keep talking.
All right. So, general RPG things. I'm going to start with this. And this seems really basic, but a good map is a must.
Oh, brother. When I tell you the importance of a good map to me, oh my God in heaven.
Right? I mean, you can't overstate how important a good map is.
Yeah. And that game had a mini map, right?
It had a mini map, which is one of the things we're going to talk about. But then you had the bigger, you had the zone map, and then you had kind of the world map.
Sure.
Here's one of the reasons I think about a good map being a must. I have said before, and I'll say again, I think that my favorite computer, like video gaming experience of all time is the Mass Effect trilogy taken as a whole. I've played it many times. I love it. You know what games have kind of dog shit maps?
Oh,
the Mass Effect trilogy.
Games? Oh, they're real bad.
Those maps are real, real bad. And so it's almost in spite of the fact that they botched that so bad that I love those games as much as I do, because those are games where if you made those maps better and more decipherable and more clear, and it's just, and the problem is that there's so many things where there's different levels and you're trying to switch between the different levels of the map to see which is which and what's where and how are these connected, that they're not done well. No. But I've played some games where the map is very good and is very useful and helpful in terms of pulling up the map and going, there's something over there. I want to go check it out.
Sure. I do think it's interesting, however, when sometimes the map is too good, like it gives you a little too much information. Sure. And you're like, I didn't need quite this much. The one that I'm thinking of specifically, this is, I guess, RPG adjacent. I'm thinking of the Jedi games, Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor.
Yep.
Very good games. I like them quite a bit. Too much information on the maps. Way too much information on the map. And it's like a weird, again, because they're trying to give you the opportunity to understand the spatial relationships between these different locations. It is a weird 3D map that's hard to navigate, hard to decipher where you're going and what you're trying to make sense of. Because I think it's giving you a little too much information. I was like, this could be a little flatter and give me a little less info, and I think that I would be able to get more out of it.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was thinking about those when I was talking about maps, because in some ways they sort of reminded me of the classic. I mean, you remember Descent, Descent 2, Descent 3?
Oh, of course I do.
And those maps, in that because you had those, you could move in all directions in those games, your map had to go in all those different directions. But those ones I thought were actually better, even though they were a lot older. I thought they were a little bit better because, like you said, the Jedi Fallen Order, I haven't played Survivor yet, but Fallen Order, definitely the maps, they were too complex. It was almost overwhelming sometimes to look at them and get yourself all twisted around in what's where and where am I in relation to this. So yeah.
Here's a good question for you regarding mini maps.
Okay.
Fixed direction or relative direction for your mini map?
I think I like relative.
I don't know. I'm thinking about it and I'm like, I can think of both and I don't know which I like better. I think relative, but sometimes, what game was I playing recently where it did have a relative mini map and then I would pull up the big map and I would be so freaking lost. Oh, I know which one it was. It wasn't necessarily a mini map situation. I forgot to mention this entirely in the What Have We Been Doing section. Peter, are you familiar with Soulframe?
I am not.
Are you familiar with Warframe?
Yes.
The guys who are making Warframe said, what if we make a fantasy game? Okay. And that game's called Soulframe. And I have, I got one of the codes to be one of the, like, they're not calling them beta. They're calling them previews, preludes, something like that. And I was listening to a podcast that was talking about it. It's a new video game podcast that I thought is very good. I need to look up the name of because they only have one episode out. And I'm like, this is a cool podcast and I'm excited to hear more from them. But their first episode was basically them talking about Soulframe, why they were enjoying it, what they were getting out of Soulframe, all that sort of stuff. It's a podcast called Side Story, which is a new video game podcast put on by a lot of the folks who are on Friends at the Table, which is an actual play show that I listen to. And Austin Walker, who is the GM for most of the Friends at the Table stuff, came up in like games journalism. He was the EIC of Waypoint for a lot of years before, Vice went under and now it's back somehow. I don't know. Anyway, I like the way that he talks about games and the way that he thinks about video games. So I was really excited to listen to this podcast, and they talked a lot about Soulframe. So I was like, I got to check this out. When I tell you that the map is one of the worst I've ever seen, the map is one of the worst I've ever seen. Oh, and part of that is because the map has a fog of war that you have to manually clear by going to these specific trees, and then it will open up the map in that spot. But you could be in those spaces in the fog of war on the map. You can't see where your little triangle is. And I'm like, at least show me where my goddamn triangle is. Yeah, it's hidden like underneath. You can barely see it. Like, you could zoom in really, really tight and sort of decipher where your character was and then try to like make your way from there. It was really, really rough design. It was one of those things that I was like, should I fill out a survey about this? I might need to fill out a survey about this.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully they fix stuff like that.
Anyway, not to talk too long about Soulframe.
No, that's good.
It is worth mentioning. I don't think it's there yet, but I think that they might be cooking. Warframe is one of those games that I've always wanted to get into and I've tried to get into from time to time, but it's so overwhelming. Have you ever like tried to play Warframe and like you boot up and they're like, okay, pick one of these 3 frames. And you're like, okay, that's easy. And then you finish that like first planet and you get on a ship and then it's like, here's 8,000 places you can go and 1,400 quests and 17 different currencies in order to be able to do the 1,800 things we're presenting you with. And I'm like, I am so lost right now.
Yeah.
And so I have started and given up on that game half a dozen times.
I started once, probably 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even longer. So I'm sure that it has only grown in complexity since then.
Yeah. So like, that's not where this is at. 'Cause this is a preview build.
Sure.
Where they're like, we're starting the process of cooking here. It's not quite like, It's not ready to come out of the oven yet, but I do think there's some interesting ideas there. And so I will be curious. I played it for a few hours and I was like, nah, I don't need to keep this installed. I'm going to uninstall this. But I'll probably check back in later. But their map does suck.
There you go. Speaking of maps, I like it when RPGs give me a good reason to explore the map. Give me a good reason to go around, don't just, I've seen, I've played some games and I'm having a hard time bringing some examples to mind. So I apologize if I can't give you concrete examples for some of these, but
sure.
There are some games where you'll have this big map, but apart from the key places that the game itself takes you, you have no reason to go and check it out.
Let me give you an example. It's not one that you have played, but is one of the biggest offenders of this. Final Fantasy 16. Okay. Which has these enormous maps that there is no reason to explore even a little bit. And so I started that game. I was primed to love that game. I wanted to love that game.
Right.
And then that game was one of the most disappointing Final Fantasy games I've ever played in my life. And I've played most of them at this point. And it is really like scraping the bottom of the barrel because okay, you made this big, beautiful map and gave me fuck all to do in it and no reason to explore it.
Yeah.
And that's an utter failure. And at that point, just do what Final Fantasy 13 did, which is it's not an open world. It is a series of corridors you run down. You don't even need there's one way to go. You don't need a map. There was a map in Final Fantasy 13. You never opened it because there was one direction to go. Yeah. And that was how functionally Final Fantasy 16 worked while giving you this pointlessly huge map and nothing to walk through it for.
Yeah. No, give me a reason. If you give me a map, then if I choose to go somewhere on that map, I should find something. I should find something interesting.
Yeah.
There ought to be. So I think that, again, we've talked about this many times. One of the big hooks for me in any sort of fiction is characters. So give me interesting characters. Give me interesting companions. Give me people to interact with that have compelling stories, that have their own stories, that somehow those stories can interact with and impact the story and maybe take me away from the main story for a little bit. Give me something interesting. Flesh out the world through these companions, these people I'm going to be interacting with throughout the story.
Absolutely. And again, maybe that's one of the reasons why Final Fantasy 16 doesn't work for me. There's one companion. It's your dog. So guess how many meaningful conversations you have with your dog.
Well,
and to me, puppies, please. My dogs. I love dogs, but yeah, I don't know. You've got to have, I think an RPG that is a single character situation is hard. I think it can be done, but it's really hard to pull off. I much prefer a party situation, and I much prefer a party that I give a shit about.
Well, again, I'm going to go back to this. Mass Effect 2, the main story of Mass Effect 2, the collectors,
it's weak as hell. It's weak as hell.
Yeah, but the reason I love Mass Effect 2 so much is because of all of the companions and their side quests. And for the most part, I think most of them are very interesting. And that's the fun part of that game.
And if they're not, there's 11 other ones.
Exactly.
Because that is the situation that they maybe went a little too hard with in Mass Effect 2. There's 12, which is too many, which obviously they learned because the next game they're like, no, 6. There's 6.
Exactly. But yeah, so give me interesting characters. I think the final thing I was thinking about before we jump deeper into Avowed, at least for me, and I'd love to hear anything you want to add. Is give me a background. Give my character a background that matters. It doesn't need to matter in every single interaction, but I want it to influence the game in some way. I want it to have ramifications to either how certain people in the world treat me or, ways that I approach things, that sort of thing. Give me a history to this character that has some impact on the game, the story, and the world around me.
Absolutely. Which is the thing, like, you say that and then people are like, well, then are you saying that you can't have a player designed character? And that's not true at all, because, I think we'll talk about Avowed, but that's true of a lot of those types of games. Like, the choices that you make in character creation when you boot up Pillars of Eternity are going to influence the way that your companions react to you. They're going to influence the way that NPCs react to you. They're going to influence the dialogue choices that you are given because of the background and the choices that you have made for your character. And so you can do that even with a created character. And all the more important, if you are playing a specific character, you better make me give a shit about that person. You better make me give a shit about them, or I'm not going to have a fun time with your game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, if I am playing Shepherd, it should matter that I am Shepherd. And, like, it means something to play as first name Shepherd rather than Olenko or whoever the hell else could have been. What if Caden Olenko had touched the fucking beacon instead of Jane Shepherd or John Shepherd or whatever their first name is? You leave because no one is ever going to say your name, so why do you bother giving him a name? But, like, there's a reason why it being Shepherd matters. And so they have to write that into the game. And there's a reason why you being, or even just as much as, like, if I'm playing an RPG where, like, there are species or race choices, does that matter? Like, do people react differently to me if I'm playing as a dwarf or if I'm playing as an elf? Or again, if I'm playing Pillars of Eternity, do people treat me like a freak if I'm a godlike? Yeah, they do, dog. Which, again, we'll talk a lot about in Avowed, because in Avowed, you don't get to choose. You are a godlike in that one. And people treat you like a freak because you're a godlike. And so, like, that enlivening of the character, that deepening of their relationships because of the way that other people react to and interact with them, I think matters a lot to how you played the RPG.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else in general you want to bring up before we dive into Avowed a little more?
Yeah. Another thing that I think is really important is it's got to be at least competently written. Like,
yes.
I am not out here saying that video games have writing that is on par with most novels you could just go pick up and read. I think in most cases, the book you could pick up is going to have better reading than the game you play. And I know there's a lot of people who are like, no, games is art. And I'm like, they are, but it is because of the interplay between story, interactivity, graphics,
they're a different
gameplay,
kind of art.
Mechanics. Yes. But, like, I like Mass Effect. If I was reading the book Mass Effect, I'd be like, that's pretty mid. Like, that writing was pretty mid. But when I'm playing through it and I'm interacting with it and I'm making choices that matter within it and that reflect in the ramifications, not only in this game, but also in the games to come, then I'm willing to give it a little leeway in terms of how tight I want that writing to be. But I still do need it to be compelling. If it's boring, I'm going to have trouble playing the game still.
Yep. I agree. So,
and another thing that I think matters, it's the gameplay compelling. Do I like the loop of playing the game? I'm not saying it needs to be great, because we've been talking a lot about Mass Effect, and guess what? Mass Effect is not a great game to play. It is competent enough. Which is always the hardest one to say, because it is my favorite by a country mile. Mass Effect 1 is my favorite, but boy, is it rough to play. Because it is not, like, they had some cool ideas. I think that the idea of guns not having bullets but overheating, so you need to manage your expectations regarding heat dispersal, is way more interesting than, well, I gotta pick up some clips and plug them into my gun. But it's also hard. It's also really hard to build a system on that, which is why in game 2 they were like, "Now fuck that shit. You gotta pick up some clips and put them in your gun." But, like, even though it's messy and hard and the Mako doesn't control for shit, there's something compelling still there in the gameplay. I still have a good time in those fights, even if I recognize objectively they're messy. if I'm playing something and the mechanics just really aren't hitting for me, it doesn't really matter how good the rest of the game is. Like I need to be, because the biggest thing I'm going to be doing is the mechanics.
Yep.
If there are plenty of video games where you can go on YouTube and watch the all cutscenes version of the game, and that'll take a 40-hour game and turn it into a 5-hour movie, which that sounds like the worst idea in the world. If I did that, then I would definitely be like, there's never been a good written video game in the history of the world. So this is not, I do not advocate watching someone do an all cutscenes only version of a game, because you spent the other 35 hours of that interacting, playing the game. So that matters a lot to me in how I relate to the game, how I interact with it, how I move through the spaces. These things all matter to me. And there's not a right or a wrong way to do those things. There are a number of different ways that you can approach those, but you need to be approaching it with some sort of care and some sort of thought of like, why are we making these choices? Why are these the options that we're giving people? And kind of go from there.
Yep. Good points. Good points. Well, let's dive into Avowed just a little bit more. And I'm going to, do you want me to name a few of the things that really stuck out to me, or how do you want to go about this?
Yeah. Okay. What was it? Because it was specifically playing Avowed that made you say, I want to have this convo. So what was it about Avowed that caught your eye so much that you were like, oh man, I really like this?
So let's go back to the minimap. I loved that the resources were visible on the minimap.
Hell yes.
When I think back to, numerous games where there's resources, I'm going to think of, in my opinion, one of the worst examples of that, and that's Dragon Age Inquisition. I was explaining to Gareth, as he's been playing Avowed on the Xbox, how when playing Dragon Age Inquisition, I ran around constantly tapping on my keyboard the F key, so that it would pick up, and like the thing, so that it would like ping and make resources like show up briefly, so you knew where to go. So I love the fact that the resources were on the minimap, but not just that. And this is one of the things I think they did that was really clever. Not always, but many times, if you got to a place and you're like, okay, it says I'm close, but I'm not seeing the resource, think vertical. And it gave me a good reason to go, okay, there's something above me or something below me, and I need to figure out how to get there. And then when I got there, they almost always gave me another good reason. It wasn't just the resource. There was a treasure chest. There was a backpack. There was something else that I found when I got there. And so it urged me and encouraged me to be a lot more, to explore the map a lot more than I think I otherwise would have, because I could see, okay, there's a resource over here. And as I move that direction, I'm go, it's not down here. I got to look up. Yeah. Or I could look at the map and I could see a building, or I could see a rock formation, and I would think, there's something up there. They trained me to go, there's something interesting up there. I need to figure out how to get there. And I think a lot of that training came from seeing those resources on the minimap. Another thing that I really liked, and I know they're not the only one, but I loved the little sound cue you got when you got closer to a treasure chest or something like that. So if you started hearing it and you didn't see it, again, it gave you that cue. I need to look elsewhere. I need to think, take a step back and think, where else should I be looking? And so I had a shit ton of fun exploring the map in Avowed, because it almost always felt like it was worth it. Like if I went and I started going, okay, can I climb up somewhere? Yeah, number one, I was going to be able to climb up there. And number two, I was going to have some reward for having done so. So I loved that.
Sure.
Another thing that I liked as it pertains to resources. Look, I don't enjoy crafting in games. That is not a mechanic that does anything for me. I hated it in Dragon Age Inquisition. I only did it the absolute minimum to make sure I had the health potions and all that bullshit. I did not. I've played a few MMOs that had crafting. I played a Guild Wars 2 that had crafting. It sucks. I hate it. It's not fun for me. And so I could run around and I could see a resource. And you know what I never, ever, ever thought to myself when I saw a resource on the ground, Eden? I never thought to myself, ooh, I need some of that. All I did is I went over and I picked it up, because then when I went to camp, here's all the recipes and how many of it I can make, because I have things and I don't have to combine X, Y, and Z. I just had to go and say, I want to make you, and 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 I want to make you. So I was able to craft, as someone who hates crafting in video games, I crafted a lot because they made it very streamlined and very easy.
Yeah.
And I really,
and
really
to be
appreciate
fair,
that.
you had to upgrade them damn weapons. You had to.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that was a game that I appreciated this about Avowed. You needed to either be upgrading or replacing your weapons regularly,
Oh, yes.
because every time you went to a new zone, you were like, oh no, every enemy is stronger than my weapons. Oops.
But also, the quality of the materials you were going to find and the other gear and stuff you were going to find in an area was directly
Also improved.
determined by the quality of the gear you had going in.
Mm-hmm.
So yes. Another thing, and this is, again, I thought this was really cool when I finally figured it out. It gave me a good reason to craft. So I'm not crafting health potions. I'm not crafting essence potions. You had to buy those or you had to pick those up. But you know what I could do is I could craft stuff that gave me more essence and more health. And then before I got into a thing, I could stack a crap ton of that on. So I could have a full health bar and a full essence bar and another couple hundred health and essence ready to go in the can if I got in there without having to like stop and pop it. Now, granted, I think I thought it was very smart. Those things replenish your health and essence very quickly when you're not in combat, and a lot more slowly when you are in combat. So you still had a reason to make sure I've got essence potions, I got health potions, because those work much faster. But it gave you this, like, you were able to kind of buff yourself going in, and other things that you could craft that would improve different stats temporarily and stuff. Again, it gave you opportunities to buff yourself, not only for combat, but for conversations. So you could go into a conversation and you could buff up your perception, your intelligence, your resolve, your all these different things with food temporarily, and it would help you have more options available. Again, maybe there's a bunch of other games that have done it and I just haven't played them. But it was the ability to use the things I crafted, not just in combat, but also to use them situationally to advance the story, that I thought was really cool, that really stood out to me. And I thought I would like to see this more in other games.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Couple other real quick things, and then, let's talk more about Avowed, and you can, again, tell me of other games maybe that I've missed. I love the fact that you're never locked into a class.
That was really nice. I liked a lot that you picked an archetype at the beginning, and that determined, I think, probably your starting stats. But that first area gave you a base version of basically every kind of weapon, and was like, start fiddling. And, I thought my goal when I went into this game was going to be grimoire in one hand and then like a one-handed weapon in the other hand. And I thought that's how I was going to go through that game. And then like 10 hours in, I had learned enough of the spells that I didn't need the grimoire in my hand anymore. And then I said, you know what? Suck grimoires. I'm going to put a gun in that hand. And so then, because this is a 2 loadout game, for most of the back half of that game, I swapped between, I had all legendary weapons that I was constantly upgrading. And I had a big old sniper rifle, and then I would quick swap to a gun in my left hand, like a pistol in my left hand, and a spear in my right hand. And that was how I played most of that game, was with that loadout. And then, but I also had spells. So if I needed to sling a spell, those were on my face buttons, and I could just fling out some fireballs still. But I didn't have to have the grimoire out. I could have gun out and be shooting and casting spells and stabbing. And it was really dynamic in the ways that it let you build a character and build a combat style that complemented the choices that you had made.
Yeah. I honestly thought the combat was fun as hell. It was a little frustrating at the very, very beginning, but it very quickly opened up. And I thought it was a lot of fun because of that ability to really be flexible. And it was a thing where, there are other games where all of a sudden you find some legendary weapon and you're like, but I can't use this.
Mm-hmm.
That sucks. And in this game, it's like, you can't use it the way you're playing the game right now, but you could just change how you're playing the game.
Yeah.
Check it out. And so that was I think the final big thing where I was just like, the combat became so satisfying because of the versatility that I found myself looking forward to more difficult combat encounters, because it was like, okay, I'm going to go into this, I'm going to have this big combat encounter and I'm going to need to, I was doing mostly spells. So it's like, okay, I need to be able to pick which different spells am I using and how am I going to go about this and how am I going to combine those spells and my other weapons for maximum damage. And so the fact that, again, you never found a weapon that was useless unless you decided it was useless to your character. And you could upgrade skills, and it didn't matter if you're mainly playing as like a wizard or whatever. Hey, look, here's a skill in this skill tree that will benefit you how you're playing it. Great. Go dump some points into that. The versatility was just, it made it so much fun to experiment with. So.
Absolutely. I definitely agree.
So I think those were some of the big things. I liked the second wind mechanic. I liked the fact that, if you lost all your health, you'd come back, but you got to be more careful really quick and survive. I thought that was kind of fun. And the other thing that I really liked, and this is just a game mechanics thing, I loved the fact that in the middle of combat, hit your bumper, pull up that wheel, and you could go over and you had the little icons for your different things that you've crafted. So all of a sudden, those stupid sporelings, I'm poisoned. Okay, boom, hit that, run over and drink some grog, because here's the icon for all of the things that are going to remove the effect of poisoned, or here's the things that are going to remove the effect of being electrocuted or on fire or froze. Like the ability to quickly get to those without having to go into my inventory and not have to necessarily choose exactly what I wanted, but just be like, okay, hit that. Well, here are the things that are going to increase my essence. Here are the things that are going to increase my health. Here's what's going to remove these conditions. Here's what's going to make me move faster. Here's what's going to, and just being able to pop into that wheel and quickly choose that without actually having to bother going into an inventory to get those benefits, I thought it streamlined that aspect of it again in a way that never felt like it was pulling me out of the game, but it was encouraging me to stay in that encounter, to stay active and keep going. So,
yeah.
Anyway, those were, I think, some of the things that jumped out at me that I thought to myself, I really enjoy this. And I hope I see similar things in other games. So,
yeah, it just plays real slickly. It plays really well. I enjoy myself playing the game. I had a good time with it, and it's not too long.
No, it's not. It was a great length.
So, should we get into a spoiler section here at the very end about Avowed?
This is spoiler section for Avowed.
I didn't know you could stop the city from being burnt down. I did not overhear apparently the conversation that is an unmarked quest marker that's like, hey, maybe you should go check out what's happening in that cave over there. I found out about that listening to a podcast about it afterwards. And I was like, oh, that's not just hard coded into the game. The city didn't have to be destroyed.
Yeah.
That gutted me. That made me feel like shit, which is cool.
So I actually it was pure happenstance for me. I just was exploring that part of the map and got into this cave, and there were Steel Garrote people, and it had not taken me very long to know that I was against them. And so I just was like, I got in there and I'm like, yo, what are you doing? All right, I guess it's on like Donkey Kong. And then I just
YOLO. Yeah. Well, good for you. I did not do that. And so that city burnt to the ground.
Ooh. That's rough, because it's a little gutting when you go back, even if you preserved it, because you go back to Paradis and, not to Fior Miseverno, and you see all the smoke coming up and everything. And yeah, like even then you can tell bad things have happened, but I can't imagine.
Yeah, it sucked.
But then, okay, so that's basically the culmination of sort of the second area.
Mm-hmm.
So then we go to the third area. We go to Shatterscarp and we go to...
and you're presented with the shitty choice.
Yeah, you're presented with shitty choice.
The classic Obsidian, make a choice, you asshole. Which terrible choice do you want to make? And I'm like, well, neither. But you're going to make me. You're going to make me.
I made a choice, and I'll tell you what. I made that choice, and I went back to Thirdborn, and the lady who's in charge of Thirdborn says, get out of here. I never want to fucking see you again.
Oh, so you chose to kill the people.
I sided with Ringgrim.
Did you?
To cut off the Adra, to stop the Dream Scourge in Thirdborn.
Interesting. I felt terrible and made the other decision because I was like, well, no, they both suck. They both suck. But yeah, no, I made the other decision and I was like, this will be the one and only time I ever agree with this terrible paladin. Go fuck yourself, but I guess blow this place up.
Yeah. No. So I'm curious what happens, because really you do that and then you have to, like, I cut off the Adra, you know, she has to pull all this essence. So like one in, I don't know, it wasn't that many people realistically, but you know, enough people died, and you go back to Thirdborn and there's bodies on the street.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. There's just like collapsed bodies, and you go and you talk to that Rawatayan who's in charge of it. I don't remember her name, but she literally is
this is my fault.
She's literally like, what did you do? And you're like, I did it to stop the Dream Scourge. The Dream Scourge won't come back. And she's like, that doesn't help everybody who just died. And literally says, she's like, fuck you, get out of here. I never want to see you again.
Damn. Well,
yeah.
Well, I went back, and guess who has the Dream Scourge?
Oh, really?
You go back, and she is starting to exhibit the traits of having the Dream Scourge.
Yeah.
Everyone's alive. The city's not filled with bodies, but the leader lady do be having the Dream Scourge now.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, talk about bad choices.
Yeah, man. Obsidian doesn't pull the punches when it comes to that stuff.
So
then the big question is, what'd you do at the end of the game? Because, like, how did you feel about, and maybe broadly, how'd you feel about Sabadal?
She annoyed the crap
as a
out of me.
person who did not know this world, who was coming in and being like, Bareth? Who the hell is Bareth? Wodica? Who are these assholes? How did you feel about Sabadal?
It was interesting. I started playing the game, and my character was sympathetic to this voice from beyond who had saved them when they'd been assassinated. Sure. And the longer the game went on, the more concerned I was about this voice I never went down the path of being outright hostile to Sapadal, but I definitely was getting to the point where my responses were like, you're psycho. What are you doing? This is not no. And so it's a
baby.
I know. So to the question, what did I do? I freed Sapadal.
Hell yeah.
I freed Sapadal, and I had actually, early on, I had preserved that giant animatronic thing from the gold dude.
Hell yeah.
So Sapadal was able to, when she wants, she can go inhabit the body and like stomp around the living lands.
Hell yeah. I did the same damn thing. And I was like, hell yeah, Sapadal, let's party, babe.
So here's the thing. I felt in some ways towards Sapadal like I felt towards Songbird in Phantom Liberty. In that,
we never talked about Phantom Liberty.
So you and I talked about it not on the pod, but we had talked about it, I think. And I think, look, Songbird, I knew she was lying to me, but Songbird has been so used and abused that it makes absolute sense that she trusts nobody.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't.
And she plays you at the end, and Johnny's like, you got played. And I was like, yeah, I did. And I'd let her do it again because I'm dying, but maybe she'll live.
Exactly. So yeah, I totally shoot what's his nuts, and I get her on the thing, and I send her up to the moon, and hopefully she can be saved. And it was kind of the same with Sapadal, where it's like, okay, you have this god who came into being because these souls on the living lands were just stuck here because the address cut off and all this stuff. So she didn't ask to happen. She didn't. All of a sudden now you've got this God who then, because of the controlling, look, this is going to sound terrible, but like my whole thought was, I'm like, oh, Wodica is like the far right. She's like, we must control.
Look, I've had beef with Wodica for 3 games now. I've hated that asshole since Pillars of Eternity 1. It is fuck Wodica o'clock always for me. And so when I found out she was the patron god of my kingdom, I was like, so I'm going to turn on this kingdom immediately.
Oh yeah, I can never go back to Adir. That. Yeah, I cannot go back to Adir. That's not allowed.
No, I set the living lands free, baby.
Oh, and did you unite them?
Oh, of course I did.
Yep. So that was me. I united the living lands, set them free, freed Soppadal, and then basically stayed in the living lands because I can't go home. The living lands are home now.
Look, baby needs some guidance. I'm going to hang out with baby.
Well, that's the thing is, you got to give this new god a chance instead of just abusing her and locking her up like Wodica does because she doesn't feel she can control her. She's got to have a chance to be her own deity. She's got to grow into her power.
It's true. And the thing is, it's like, I think the game presents its world really well without giving you a huge lore dump. Because, like, you don't know how the other gods came to be, and it doesn't matter. You don't need to know. They were all just dudes. So all of the gods were just dudes.
Like I say, it's important to understand, I went into this game not realizing that it was in the same world as the Pillars of Eternity games.
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be.
It took very little time for me to obviously understand that, but it didn't matter that I had no knowledge of those, that I haven't played those yet. I have them. I want to go play them now, but I've never played them. I knew nothing about this world. I had no problem at all. Like I thought they did a great job of presenting it in such a way that you could do just that. You could come in with no prior knowledge and still enjoy the hell out of this game.
But old heads know Wodica's there, and they're like, man, fuck her. She's the worst. Where's Bareth? You know who's cool? Bareth. I love Bareth because of Pillars of Eternity 2. Her voice shows up for like 3 lines, and I'm like, yo, Bareth, come on through. Why are you letting Wodica be such a dick to Soppadal? Like, come on, Bareth. Yeah. We weren't tight, as in the player character and Bareth, but me, Eden, and Bareth, we're tight. I was your herald for a whole game, babe. Come through.
There you go. But
I think it's a really tight game. I really enjoyed it. It probably sold terrible because it's on Game Pass, but it doesn't have to sell well because you are owned by Microsoft now. So your job is put games on Game Pass.
Interestingly, I've heard it did pretty well. According to, I don't have official numbers, but I know in the Avowed subreddit and stuff, people were talking about speculating on DLC and future content. And a lot of the people were saying, no, it's done well enough that people from Obsidian are like, yeah, we're going to keep adding on to this game for a little bit because it has done well. And that's exciting.
I thought the idea was there was no plan for DLC or anything. I thought they were like, no, this is the game.
I heard recently that there are talks about, they're planning on doing some more stuff to it because it has done well enough, which I think is great because, again, you and I have talked about Obsidian. I think Obsidian is a really neat game studio. I think they're some of the better writers. I think they do interesting things. They create interesting worlds, or they do interesting things in the worlds into which they play. For example, the Fallout world or Star Wars. And I want to see them be successful, and I want to see them, I want to see them do well. And I'm glad that they have the 300-pound gorilla in their corner, of Microsoft, standing there owning them. But at the same time, I could be wrong, but it doesn't feel like Microsoft is telling Obsidian what to do.
I mean, you never played Pentiment. If they
I started playing Pentiment, and honestly, that's one of the reasons why I'm like, clearly Microsoft is letting Obsidian just be like, yo, dog, we bought you because of who you are. Do your stuff.
So make some games. Pentiment's one of the sickest games I've ever played in my life, dog. It's so good and so tight and so well written and so well structured and does such interesting things with the idea of how a game works. And you know, you can't do that if you don't have Mama Moneybags Microsoft right there. But Microsoft is just like, yeah, make some games for us. By all means, you know, Josh Sawyer, you want to do some weird freak game about solving murders in the 1500s? Make us a weird freak game about solving murders in the 1500s. And the crowd goes wild. Did it sell well? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it sold well or not. They got to make it. And that's cool. And frankly, everyone else that Microsoft buys does nothing. Nothing. So I'm glad that someone's doing something. I'm glad that Obsidian is out here making things still.
Yep, I agree. So anything else before we wrap it up? We've gone a little long today, but I thought that was a fun discussion, and I certainly enjoyed talking about it. And, you know, it was a good game. I hope more people play it.
I mean, I will say, if you like Avowed, if you enjoyed the world, if you enjoyed the storytelling, the writing, go play Pillars 1 and 2. And, like, you'll have a great time.
I'm totally planning
they're
on
messy games because they are, you know, what if, again, they're game of the year 2002, except it came out in 2018. That's how those games feel, because they were like, hey, y'all liked Baldur's Gate, right? What if we did another one of those? And it's really a very solid one of those, but it does feel a little creaky in 2025. But it's worth it. It's really well written. And again, if you like what this team's doing, go play Pentiment. It's sick.
Yep. No, I'm definitely going to. So, well, cool. Well, we'll wrap it up here. We'll be back in another couple of weeks with another topic. And if you've got any thoughts or any feedback, you want to tell us what your thoughts were on playing any of these games, reach out to us at feedback@themiddleofculture.com. And we'll talk again in a couple weeks. Bye.
See y'all then. Bye.